Don't miss new episodes of So What Happened To, Saturday mornings on RatedEm.
In recent years, the gaming landscape has become a lot more unified. Now we have things like crossplay, consoles that can now keep up with PCs, and the freedom to use a variety of input methods instead of just one or the other. But back in the day, it wasn't always like that. There used to be a big divide between games that launched on console versus games that launched on PC. However, over the years, developers have tried to aid this, whether it's releasing their big PC games on consoles through ports, or making console-exclusive entries for their series. Many attempts have been made to make gaming a shared experience. In today's episode of The Spot, we are taking a look at a few examples to see what led up to today's shared gaming landscape. As I mentioned in the intro, we'll talk about direct ports and spin-off games of series that were predominantly on PC. Although these spin-off games I found were the inspiration for this video, ports actually played an equally big part in the topic, and I couldn't make this video without discussing both. Now, I couldn't find what was definitively the first PC game or PC game series that found a home on console, so I started with what was the earliest that I am most familiar with, and that being the 5th generation of consoles. The 5th generation was the introduction of full 3D for console players, so a few games that relied on being 3D found a home on these consoles. The most notable to me was Doom 64. There was a full port of Doom 1 on the PlayStation 1 beforehand, and it was very well praised, but Doom 64 is interesting to me because it's an entirely original game. Doom 64 is a mainline Doom game. It wasn't just Doom for the 64, it wasn't a remaster, it was a new game exclusive to the console. It featured all new designs for enemies and weapons, and 28 new levels with 4 bonus ones. On the other hand, there was StarCraft 64, which aimed to be more of a direct port of the classic RTS, although due to the hardware, many changes were made. Voice-acted cutscenes were axed and had to be replaced by text explanations. The controls weren't as intuitive due to the keyboard and mouse controls having to be translated to a single controller. Some levels required the expansion pack to run, and on top of all of this, a few glitches were left in the game. But the game did have some bonus content that wasn't in the PC release, such as co-op multiplayer, new missions, and a refined tutorial, and they were all included with the N64 release. PC games really started to branch over to console in the 6th generation. Hardware was getting better around this time, so it was easier to provide an experience closer to the PC originals on consoles than previous generations had. Half-Life 1 found a home on the PlayStation 2 with updated visuals, keyboard and mouse support, and an exclusive 2-player co-op campaign called Half-Life Decay. Many have said it's a good port, and some people online have said that they would never have discovered their favorite game if this port hadn't existed. There is nothing but good things about it. There was going to be a Dreamcast port of the game, but it was scrapped right before release, unfortunately. We'll come back to Valve games in a bit, as this won't be the last time they put one of their games on console. Before Fallout 3 many years later, Fallout was largely considered a PC-focused series, but Fallout Brotherhood of Steel would be the first Fallout game on consoles. It differs drastically from the standard Fallout formula of the time. Rather than being a point-and-click turn-based RPG, it's a top-down action RPG. It puts the iconic 50s-inspired visuals in the backseat and opts for something more akin to like Prince of Persia Warrior Within, if that makes sense. The soundtrack has 2 Slipknot songs in it, so hopefully that paints the picture. Brotherhood of Steel is largely forgotten about by the Fallout fanbase. It completely lacks everything that made the series so unique in the first place, just to say, hey, we put a Fallout game on consoles. Unreal Tournament 1999 had ports on both PS2 and Dreamcast. The Dreamcast version was closer to the PC original and even featured online multiplayer. However, the PS2 version was strictly single player only and also suffered from performance issues. It did have keyboard and mouse support, but it was ultimately a little redundant. No extra content was included with the console releases, it was just simply Unreal Tournament 1999. Outside of multiplayer on the PS2 version, there wasn't really anything cut and not really anything added. I do also want to mention StarCraft Ghost really quickly, as this was going to be a single-player action-adventure third-person shooter strictly for consoles, but unfortunately it was scrapped halfway through development. It was going to be an original story following the character of Nova, but it was delayed and then cancelled on GameCube and then cancelled entirely. I do plan to make a game graveyard about this game in the future, but at the same time, I'm not super knowledgeable about StarCraft, so it's definitely not a priority for me unless a good amount of you want to really see it. You know what? Let's put the power to the people. If you really desperately want to see a game graveyard episode about StarCraft Ghost, and I'm talking like you will not be able to die happily if you don't see this video levels of wanting to see that episode, leave a comment saying, I would like to see a game graveyard episode on StarCraft Ghost, and if there is enough of a response, I will take the time to become familiar enough with StarCraft lore to make the video as accurate as possible. Alien Hominid is a game that debuted on Newgrounds as a Flash game and then would get ports on PS2, GameCube, and the original Xbox. It's a side-scrolling shooter akin to Contra, where you're an alien creature fighting off waves of Men in Black-style government agents. I think this game is super cool, as I believe it was the first time a web-based game was ported to consoles. This wasn't a PC game in the sense of Half-Life or Unreal Tournament, where they were backed by huge companies. This was as indie as it got for the time. Remember, we're talking about a Flash game here, like this runs in your browser. The developers had to completely fund, develop, and publish the game all on their own onto 3 different consoles. And because of this game, we later got hits like Castle Crashers and Battle Block Theater, both done by the same team. We'll also talk about more web-based games getting console ports towards the end of this video, but this is worth mentioning now. This generation of consoles is also the first time where we'd see Call of Duty off of the PC platform. As a lifelong fan of the series, it does throw me for a loop remembering that this series actually started off as a critically acclaimed PC game. Call of Duty Finest Hour features multiple different stories regarding the Second World War to make up its campaign. It is still a first-person shooter. It wasn't like Brotherhood of Steel, where it was an entirely different video game. It's also worth noting that the soundtrack was done by Michael Giacchino, who has done so many soundtracks for so many different pieces of media, I'd be here all day if I named them off. And the game also has AC/DC singer Brian Johnson voicing a character. I don't know who, but he's somewhere in there. There was also Call of Duty 2 Big Red 1, which was a console-exclusive spin-off, specifically following the 1st Infantry Division's campaign through the Second World War. It included story narration from Mark Hamill, and many actors from the show Band of Brothers voicing the game's characters. Both of these games would later be released in a bundle only for the PlayStation 2 under the name of Call of Duty Legacy. Despite that, the 2 games separately released on all 3 main consoles of that generation. Again, not really much to say about these games as they're still first-person shooters, it's just that they're spin-off games of the main series and they're both console exclusives. Finally, regarding this generation, I'll talk about The Sims. The Sims, SimCity, and Roller Coaster Tycoon are some of the most well-known PC games of their time, simply because they're relatively accessible for people who don't play video games all too much. Sure, Half-Life is one of the most important PC games to ever release, but my grandmother is more familiar with The Sims than Half-Life. I'm just saying. The Sims, being so focused on clicking through menus, really worked on PC, but that didn't stop EA from making spin-offs and ports to other consoles. The Sims 1 was released on PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, but all 3 differed from their PC counterpart. The console version had a fully 3D camera and 3D models, where the original game was a static, isometric view that used a mix of pre-rendered sprites and 3D models. More changes were made regarding gameplay. There is a pseudo-story mode called Get a Life mode, where you control a customized sim and have set goals that you need to achieve with them, as well as Play the Sims mode, which was the standard Sims gameplay, but you strictly play with a pre-made household. After that was Sims Bustin' Out, an entirely console-exclusive title. It was similar to the console port of the original Sims, where there is a mission mode and a free play mode. Get a Life mode was renamed to Bust Out mode, and Play the Sims mode was renamed to free play mode. There is also a lot of content added for each game mode. You can make your sim do a lot more in this game compared to the last one, but the gameplay loop of it being a more railroaded and goal-oriented game remains the same. I do want to mention that Bustin' Out had online multiplayer in the PS2 version, and from what I've read, it's kind of like a chat room. You can visit other players' houses, hang out, and if you have a keyboard plugged into your PS2, you can even send messages to other players. The Herbs focuses on a large city environment rather than a small town. It still retains that goal-focused gameplay, but it changes it a little bit. Rather than having task, leading up to one final goal, the Herbs has you do whatever tasks you like to raise your reputation, which allows you to gain access to new areas of the city, have a better apartment, or get accepted into VIP lounges, a bunch of other stuff. Also, weirdly enough, the music group Black Eyed Peas had a hand in the game's development. They produced some original music for the game, and the group's members appear as characters in the game, including Fergie. Like, all the time I turn around, brothers gather around, always looking at me up and down, looking at my Fergie. Yes, that Fergie. This game is supposedly a hidden gem. I didn't really get to see all of it when I was getting my gameplay footage, but I'll take the internet's word for it. The Sims 2 console port was a bit closer to the original game, offering more freedom with what you could do with your sim. The controls are also a bit different, allowing you to directly control your sim with analog controls. It's not drastically different from the PC version, but it's definitely not a direct port of The Sims 2. And the reason for this is because it was actually intended to be a sequel to The Herbs, but it was changed last minute to resemble The Sims 2.
Need a new form of entertainment in your life? Join the thousands of others who have considered subscribing. Side effects may include joy, laughter, and newfound knowledge about video games. Talk to your doctor about if subscribing is right for you.
Similarly to the 6th generation, the 7th generation of consoles brought a whole bunch of improvements that allowed these ports to more accurately resemble their PC counterparts. I want to start off with the Orange Box, a collection of Valve games that dropped on the Xbox 360 and PS3 in 2007. The games included were Half-Life 2, Team Fortress 2, and the original Portal. However, more Valve games were released on the 7th generation consoles than just these three. Portal 2, Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, and Counter-Strike Global Offensive all received their own standalone ports for home consoles. I've played Portal 2 on console, and it's fine enough, and I haven't played the Left 4 Dead games on console, but I can't imagine they're all too different. However, I don't even want to imagine what CSGO plays like on a controller. One of the biggest console ports was Minecraft Xbox 360 Edition, which later came to consoles such as the PS3 and PSP, as well as a few consoles after this generation. This version of Minecraft on consoles that was developed by 4J Studios is referred to collectively as a legacy console, as around the time of the 8th generation, it would be phased out and replaced by Bedrock Edition, a unified version of the game that allows for crossplay between devices. I can't hate the change all too much, there really is no downside to being able to play a game with somebody no matter what device they're using, but in Bedrock Edition's case there are plenty of downsides ranging from microtransactions to game-breaking bugs. Legacy console is a staple of a lot of people's childhoods, including mine. I wish there was a way to track how many hours you spent on a 360 game because I would love to know how many weeks worth of playtime I put into the 360 edition. Legacy console also wasn't a direct port. It was Minecraft, but completely built from the ground up in a specialized engine. That's why the game feels and looks different. However, despite being an original recreation of the game, the translation from a keyboard and mouse to a controller wasn't all that harmful to the experience. Every button made sense. Terraria was also ported to consoles around this time, as well as mobile, which is how I played it as a kid. I was told by everyone I knew who had Terraria on console that I should never buy Terraria on console. I think it was because the mouse-centered gameplay just didn't really translate well to a console's controller. I knew like 3 guys when I was younger who talked about it like it was a plague upon humanity. I've heard nothing but bad things about Terraria on consoles, I'm sorry. Meat Boy was released as a Flash game in 2008, and then 2 years later, a sequel released on the Xbox Live Arcade called Super Meat Boy. It's a platformer game that is just really difficult, that's the whole bit. Very influential to the indie game movement though. Again, this is a Flash game that got a sequel on the Xbox 360. It went from web browsers to home consoles just like Alien Hominid. Alice Madness Returns did include a console port of the original Alice game, and Metal Gear Solid HD Collection included the MSX Metal Gear games, so I'll throw those in too. The Sims returned to consoles this generation with The Sims 3 getting ports on the 360 and PS3. The Sims 3 on consoles lacked the expansions, with the exception being Pets, which was later re-released as a physical version of the original port. There were also limitations regarding the game's open worldness and a restriction on furniture and buildings. But aside from that, I don't think The Sims 3 on console is all that much different from the PC version. A surprise considering the previous Sims console games were all over the place in terms of cut content. Before we jump into the 8th generation, I want to quickly discuss handheld ports. 2 of these games are actually what inspired the creation of this whole video, so before you think that this is a useless segment, you would not be watching this video if it wasn't for what I'm about to say. Club Penguin Elite Penguin Force was released on the DS in 2008, being a point-and-click adventure spin-off of the iconic MMO. You play as a secret agent in the titular EPF, solving puzzles and playing minigames to advance in the story. Now, I loved Club Penguin as a kid, but I never owned this game. I just don't really think I had much interest in anything outside of the main MMO, because I know that there was also a Wii game released, and I never really cared for that one as a kid. But one cool thing about this game is that it utilized Nintendo Wi-Fi connections so you could transfer any coins that you'd earned in the DS game to your main Club Penguin account. There had to have been some sort of infinite money exploit with this. I would be surprised if there wasn't. Another game I wanted to mention was Pop Tropica Adventures, also released for the DS. And this game is based off of Pop Tropica, another browser-based MMO like Club Penguin, but owned by Jeff Kinney. And before you say, I don't know who Jeff Kinney is, yes you do. Pop Tropica Adventures seems to just be Pop Tropica, but without the MMO features and a limited selection of 4 islands to play through. Quick explanation for how the game works if you didn't grow up playing it. Pop Tropica has multiple islands that the player can explore, and each one has its own storyline you progress through by completing puzzles or accomplishing tasks for NPCs. This game got a sequel on the 3DS and mobile called Pop Tropica Forgotten Islands, and it featured exclusive islands for the player to experience that hadn't resurfaced in any other Pop Tropica game. Both of these games were made by Ubisoft, so that means in 2013, Ubisoft was working on Assassin's Creed Rogue for last gen, Assassin's Creed Unity for next gen, and then Pop Tropica Forgotten Islands for the 3DS. Weird to think about. I was originally going to make this video only about these games, as well as Alien Hominid and then Super Meat Boy, and then I was going to call it like when browser games go console, but I figured I would broaden the topic. I guess I'll also mention The Sims 3 was on DS and 3DS, but you can check out my episode on 3DS ports to learn more about those two games. You should also check it out because I'm really proud of the video. I think you should just watch it because it's really good, and you should go watch the video because it's really good. Finally, I want to discuss the 8th generation of consoles. Now, up until this point, console ports of PC games have mostly been fine. Some have missed the mark, but for the most part, they've done a pretty good job. But the 8th generation, for some reason, is just where everything falls apart. We got ports of PC games that were relevant for the time, and we got them not too long after the PC versions were out, but unfortunately, they were just not the best quality. One that I vividly remember was PUBG for the Xbox One. The graphics were terrible, it ran horribly, it controlled even worse, but I do remember my friends and I getting home from school to squad up and run a few matches daily. Roblox was around way before the Xbox One, however, it was the first home console that Roblox was ported to. It also performed poorly upon its initial release. Menus would take their time to load, and anything regarding a GUI was torture to navigate with the controller. I think a few Roblox devs ended up making console versions of their games that worked better with the controller because Roblox is just too keyboard and mouse focused. Subnautica and Ark Survival Evolved I have not played on consoles, I actually haven't played them at all, but I've been told these games shared a similar fate where the performance was poor and the controls were uncomfortable. I think all of these were just too ambitious to be on console, or the ports were just rushed out too quickly, or maybe even both. However, I do think that without these ports of the popular at the time PC games, we wouldn't have things like crossplay. I think up until this point, PC to console ports were just like, here, The Sims 3 on console, but something about the 8th generation made it click for devs to be like, oh, these console players want the same experience as PC players and want to interact with PC players on the same game. I think this kind of had to do with the connectedness that the 8th generation and just technology in general had during this time. I've talked about this notion a few times on the channel, which leads me into the conclusion for this video. There really hasn't been anything bad regarding the barrier between PC games and console games over the years. If anything, the barrier has been lowered. Sure, there's still games that are PC exclusive, but there's been a larger push from game devs to make gaming a unified, shared experience. We have crossplay now. Ports of games usually have nothing cut at all. Games that were locked to PC previously, or even locked behind console exclusivity previously, have been made available everywhere thanks to ports and more so remasters. They aren't PC games, but D-Blob and Epic Mickey were both Wii exclusive until their remasters. You can play Gears of War 1 on PC and play online with a squad of PS5 and Xbox Series X players. As I mentioned earlier, you can play Minecraft with anyone regardless of console, PC, or mobile device. There genuinely is no downside to having gaming be as accessible to everyone as possible. I do think that PC games being exclusive to PC hasn't ever really been a monetary restriction, i.e. the way that Astrobot is a PS5 exclusive to sell more PS5s. I think it's always been that the games usually rely too much on the keyboard and mouse, or consoles just can't run the games without issues. But I do think console exclusives are bad. I know it's done to get you to buy a company's console as opposed to other ones, like I just said. Astrobot is a PS5 exclusive, and I have definitely thought about buying a PS5 just to play it, but it's still really stupid. All the reasons as to why games are console exclusive or PC exclusive make sense, but the argument of everyone should be able to enjoy video games outweighs them all. Empathy will always triumph over profit margins and fiscal quarters in my books. I wrote down in my notes that this would be the first RatedEm video where I don't talk about how much capitalism has impacted video games, but look where we ended up.